Bueno, muchas gracias. Le damos la bienvenida a este
Thank you.
último de la tarde.
And can I just welcome
Les
our
recuerdo entonces que
last panel for the
después de
afternoon.
este panel hay una sesión de preguntas
After
y
this, as I
respuestas y
said, we're
después
going
la
to have a
sesión
Q&A session,
la sesión de
and
networking.
then we'll have our networking
aquí en el lobby.
event here in the
Este
lobby.
panel, repito, es moderado por Alfredo Moisés.
So, as I said, our moderator is Alfredo Moisés, the CEO of Café Monte Grande in Mexico, very well known, company located in Chiapas. So you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you all. I'd like to begin by thanking the International Coffee Organization and the organizers of this sixth Consultative Forum on Coffee Sector Finance to have invited me to moderate this panel. It's really a privilege for me as a third-generation coffee grower. I have devoted my life to coffee. The company is now some 100 years old. It's just celebrating its centenary, and coffee is still a good business. I think it has a long way to go. It has a future from what has been discussed here thus far. If I could introduce our panelists.
Presidir el día de hoy. Tenemos al señor Benjamin Schmeller.
We have Mr. Benjamin Schmeller, the Senior Director of Root Capital, Mr. Corey Bush, Senior Trader of Falcon Coffees, Mr. Craig Courtney, Senior Independent Consultant for the Initiative on Smallholder Finance. And we have Mr. Mauricio Ribeiro do Valle, the Superintendent of Finance and Human Resources of the Cochupe Cooperative in Brazil. Our panel is dealing with financial mechanisms for coffee producers. And we are looking at whether there are opportunities, and if so, what, to facilitate the provision of finance to smallholder coffee producers, particularly. And looking at how to get access to finance, because this continues to be a problem for many farmers. We'll begin with a question. What is needed to make these innovative financial solutions happen? And I'm going to turn now to Mr. Benjamin Schmeller to kick off.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon. Nice to be here with all of you and see you all today. I think that because we have a 3 o'clock panel on financing, I thought I would shake it up a little bit and make sure to read an entire loan document to you all for the next hour or so, and then get your comments on that. That joke fell a little flat. Wave me if everybody's still out there, ready to have a good time on finance. My name is Ben Schmerler. I work for an organization called Root Capital. We are based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have 9 field offices. Since our goal ultimately is to grow rural prosperity for small-scale farmers. Since 1999, we've financed roughly 700 small-scale enterprises, farmer cooperatives, private enterprises, entrepreneurs in 23 countries that focus on purchasing product from individual farmers, aggregate them, and then sell them into global or local markets. Half of all of our financing since that time has been done in the coffee value chain. And alongside of that, in about 2006, we realized that both capital on its own wasn't sufficient enough to actually get the flow of it to move. And so we started offering financial management training called our advisory services, which in a really simple way is like a rural MBA program to get more businesses, more suppliers into a pipeline where they can access different types of credit. We work in a space that we call kind of the missing middle of finance. We finance businesses that have at smallest levels around $1 million in sales that require capital of about $50,000 to $3 million. What our role really is to accelerate those businesses, and then over time those businesses can graduate to more commercial capital that can provide it more cheaply, more efficiently than we can. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about innovative ways of finance. I think I'll probably stay away from all of the challenges and try to focus a little bit more on some of the solutions, since we kind of have kicked around the challenges for most of the day. But when I do think about solutions, I think that on the other side of that, there are some barriers to creating more innovative ways to finance small producers. And so we'll make sure to talk about those today. Thanks.
Gracias, Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. So can I turn now to Corey Bush and ask for your comments, please?
Thank you. It's also good to be here, although I don't have the excuse of jet lag and long-distance travel to get here. We at Falcon Coffees were green coffee traders based here in the UK. We source and trade coffee from 18 producing countries, building collaborative supply chains for mutual profit and positive social impact. I did a lot of thinking about what to say, but sort of in sort of true collaborative spirit, I crowdsourced this a little bit with some of our team in East Africa, and it came to sort of these 4 points that I find key to building collaborative supply chains. I think many of which touch on smallholder finance. I think one, and Rick Reinhardt beat me to the punch on this one a little bit in the last session. We believe in radical transparency from the farm gate to the consumer. This is sort of an entryway to solving, I think, these distributional challenges that were mentioned by both Edgar and Nicholas in the last session. We focus on localized risk management solutions that are appropriate for both the scale and the context in which they're deployed. I think, again, speaking of East Africa, that presents a different scale and level of challenge than what we might see in a producing country such as Brazil, Vietnam, etc. We feel co-investment in supply chain development is necessary, so that's traders such as ourselves, that's roasters, that's social lenders such as Root Capital and a few of the others, as long as the non-governmental and multilateral sectors. And then there's a need, I think, allocation of the correct type of finance to the right supply chain participants for the right purposes at the optimal time. So that's sort of a confusing statement in and of itself, but the world is awash in cheap money right now. Interest rates are at record low prices. So my view is it's not really a question of there not being enough money to get to farmers. I mean, there are some of your competitor, if you will, funds that have more money than they know what to do with, more money that they can place and invest. So it's really a question of minimizing risk and finding the right mode and method of lending. I think I'm just about at my limit, and I think questions are good, so I'll pass the mic.
Okay. Gracias, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
Gracias, Corey. Bueno, vamos a oír los comentarios.
Now, we'll have comments from Craig Courtney, who is the Senior Independent Consultant, Initiative on Smallholder Finance.
Thanks for inviting the Initiative for Smallholder Finance and myself to the conference. First of all, the Initiative for Smallholder Finance, just to those of you who aren't familiar with this, is a multi-stakeholder, multi-donor platform interested in how can we augment and increase the amount of finance that gets to smallholders, not just in the coffee market, but globally. And our sponsors include the U.S. government, KfW, Germany, Rockefeller Foundation, various foundations and governments. And our mandate has two elements to that. One is research. So we produce a number of research reports, some of you might be familiar with, that look at the pathways to get more and more capital to smallholders and more and more finance. And that could be through value chain solutions like the coffee supply chain, or it could be through direct to farmer, through microfinance solutions and various other kind of structures. And that's one mandate. And the other mandate is and the desire of our funders is to, how do we actually transactionalize this? How do we do, we might come up with an interesting structure, a blended finance facility or foreign exchange structure or something like that, but how do we execute that and work to bring together the right partners and this type of thing? And that's more my background. I joined the ISF last year. My background was in investment banking in corporate finance for 20 plus years in London and Hong Kong, and I retired from that and moved into development finance. And how could you bring together private capital with public capital, foundation money, so investment and philanthropic, to improve a development outcome? And that could be around smallholder finance, it could be in other areas that I work in, but I devote half of my week for the last year and years to come to this area, having done a lot of work in the kind of ag sector as a banker. But that's just enough about background. What I've listened today, and to boil it down to me, it's what you can see is there's everybody's talking about different kinds of risks, and it could be market risks and price, foreign exchange, costs, these type of things, operational risks, mechanization, irrigation, that basically are being faced by all the parties in the supply chain of the coffee. Those risks not only exist in this supply chain, they exist in cotton, they exist in sugar, and various other ones too. But at the same time, this market's experiencing some more difficulties in achieving finance. And I would lean to the Council of Smallholder Agricultural Finance, which ISF helped to create. Their annual report was out last year, and it talked about how their lending to this sector has decreased in the last number of years, whereas it's increased 25% to other sectors. And so what is that? There's a mismatch between the risk and the solutions that are there. And we've gone about, as our one mandate of looking at solutions, to look at, and some of this came out in one of our recent reports called Inflection Point, and you're all welcome. One thing about being a research house that's funded by public government entities is all our research is online. So we have 2 major reports in the last couple of years, plus independent, specialist reports around foreign exchange, about financial technology, big data, that all are relevant to agriculture, smallholder finance, and coffee. But some of the conclusions we've come to, some of the solutions really lie in blended capital, blended finance solutions. You really need to take the risks that are there and align the aspirations of the various capital providers, public, private, and to basically create solutions that are of a blended nature. And some of those, and I'll stop with, and if you give me 30 seconds more, some of the characteristics of those to answer I'll start just to throw this out, is you need greater partner coordination in the solutions. You need risk sharing mechanism, not just risk subsidy mechanisms, but how can you share the greater risks? Flows to meet cycles, the cycles of the market, to the extent that, how that's relevant in different markets. You need financial institutions that have the technical assistance that understand the sector. There's not sector expertise necessary that lies in these institutions, and that's one of the things that Root Capital provides. You also need technical assistance to the farmers on how to use the inputs, how to use finance, and understanding that. You need effective producer organizations, and you need definitely data gathering and transparency. So these are the kind of areas these are just high-level comments I'd like to make and hand over.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Greg. I'll now ask Mauricio Ribeiro from Brazil, representing Cochupé. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to divide what I have to say into 2 points. One, financial aspects in production and marketing. I'd like to say that investment in the production of coffee is high. There's storage, there's mechanisms, machinery, labor, works. Also in the second, there's high investment. And we have a problem in Brazil that's similar to Africa is also facing. And that's high interest rates, different to the developed world, where they're low. So we have small producers on the one hand and large banks on the other. In the cooperative, what can I tell you about that? First of all, there's a cooperative which has a balance sheet. It's internationally recognized. It has good relations in terms of providing information, exchanging information with the financial system at international level. So it is a cooperative that organizes its members and manages to negotiate with the financial system. So the cooperative has access to the international money market and also to the domestic market. So it is a center between the smallholder and the major bank. Now, moving on to the second part, marketing, we also have a lot of investment. Again, there's operating cash that's required. You need immediate response. And again, the futures market, 6-9 months ahead. There's a lot of volatility, there's a lot of risk. And I would say that the futures market are an opportunity for producers if they could get access to them. And once again, we have an example in the cooperative because it organizes these producers and allows them to gain access to the futures market. And it's been said here that the futures market has a problem in terms of adjustment and also in how it's handled, because there's a lot of investment in financial resources. Our example mitigates this. We managed to organize for the producers and the forward market, and we also in New York, we're looking into the futures market. That is, we absorb the risk, the marginal risk, and we assume the risk. That is, the cooperative assumes the risk. And these 2 points, whether in the funding or the administration of the risk, this is an example where the cooperative can organize the producers in strong organizations, in what we call cooperatives. But we're not going to achieve the financial market. There are major players, but we've got to have our producers organized to be able to reach that market. And that really is the points I wanted to make to you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mauricio. Well, from all of this, I think we can draw from what has happened to the business. And I do believe it is a business. We need to reorganize what we've been doing. We need to reorganize our coffee sector throughout the world. The situation is that it's a situation that's unique because, again, it's evolved over time. Because if we look at prices, this doesn't represent anything like the prices as they were 20 years ago, over the past 10, 20 years. There have been valuations, devaluations, and this affects countries. And sometimes it helps countries. But possibly in some countries, but all the inputs are based in dollars. All that they need to purchase to drive their industry, so the costs are high. And therefore, living wage is reducing for the producer. And one question which I will direct to Capita. You are dealing with root capital, as I've understood this. In Chiapas, for example, and you are talking about medium-sized producers. How can we support the smallholder? This is really so there's so much else involved apart from just the finance. How do you help the smallholder deal with all of that? What considering their living conditions? Because sometimes their conditions are deplorable. How can you help them? How can you get them access to funding? Thank you.
It's a great question. I think kind of building off of what Corey said around the financing being a commodity and there being cheap capital available, and also a few of the things that Craig had said, I think one of the ways that we think about one of the ways that we can target and better target small-scale producers, I mean, at Root Capital, all of our clients in all of the ag commodities we work in, and whether or not they're, and if local markets, they're all small-scale farmers. So our entire portfolio last year, which was about $175 million of disbursements, we're very small, but we think of ourselves as more of a demonstration, was all to small-scale farmers, with the average or the median somewhere below 250 a day. So really small-scale farmers on the average. And one of the ways that we target them, and one of the ways you can actually influence the ability to kind of go up and increase flow of capital, are some of the things that that Craig had mentioned before. From a government level, a parastatal institution, from donor agencies, things like guarantees, risk-sharing facilities, ones that really do write down some of the risk. Right now we have a number of guarantees, about $65 million through the Development Credit Authority at the U.S. government, which is an excellent starting place, but it only covers up to 50% of the losses on the portfolio, and we have country-level limits. And so if you could get rid of some of the country-level limits and get more risk-sharing capital in there, we could probably do more deals. So this is like one side. We kind of break it down to three levels. You have the capital supply side, so are there the right capital available in the marketplace? The capital demand side, weak enterprises, is there the right capacity to actually finance? And then the enabling environment. So from the capital supply side, guarantees, Craig mentioned earlier, currency reserves. There's a lot of opportunity. Right now we're seeing a ton of opportunity to finance in Colombia, renovation, in Peru, in other markets in Central America, but a lot of those need to be financed in local currencies. And with the strength of the US dollar right now, the moment you put a dollar into another country and it converts to a local currency, you've already lost 30 cents on that dollar before it's even left the country, before you're even talking about the rest of your risk. And so currency reserves, ways to hedge that currency at very small scales. We're talking about $50,000 to $150,000 loans. There's no place in the market currently to go out and hedge our risk against that. So we've been able to use ways of philanthropy and a mix of private capital to do it, but it's not scalable, and it's relatively small. And so unlocking some type of currency mechanism would be a way to really kind of boost financing, accelerate it. The blended capital that Craig will speak to a little bit more. Obviously, there's some price risk management mechanisms available, or that need to be available to kind of unlock our financing as well. And then I think the capital demand side is a key one, right? So like everybody comes, every conference you go to, if you're a financier, they walk in and say, we don't have access to capital. And you say, yes, that's what we hear every time. And that's a common thing to say. There's not a lot of very good investable deals. Root Capital is taking probably the riskiest position in the marketplace, financing small-scale farm organizations. And we've kind of we've hit a point right now where we think we know about all of the deals we could potentially do today in coffee. And so there's a lot of producer organizations out there that need technical assistance, that need support around agronomic, that need to build up their back office so that they can be financeable by someone like a Root Capital. Another issue that we're kind of seeing in addition to that is, as we go out and we've looked at over the last 3 years, a number of renovation deals. And one of the challenges on the renovation side, which we all know, when the gentleman from Vietnam spoke today around all the trees being 60 years old, Roya in Central America, when we go out to look at deals, one, there's not enough enterprise capacity to manage those deals. And two, when we start going to the farmer level, we find out that the majority of farmers are already over indebted. And so they already have too much debt on their books to take that risk as well. And so one of the ways that we think about it is we have to, at Root Capital, we have to understand our risk, and then we have to basically share that risk with a number of others. And then there's the stuff that has to work in the enabling environment. This is policy. This is ways to work out deals. There are certain countries where if we put money in, we get taxed heavily. Other places that if we lose money, we have no legal recourse. Those are other opportunities where if those types of policy changes were to be in place, we would be able to step in and increase the access of capital.
Okay, gracias, Benjamin.
Thank you, Benjamin. Now, I have a question or a suggestion for Cory.
De la industria.
The industry. some of these purchasing companies, when they have contracts at fixed prices and they don't follow the market price. In the long term, can there be annual or biannual increases? I don't know if we could work with credit in this way. The contract that a producer signed with industry, it could be Falcon Coffee or whatever. This contract that is a guarantee for the banks and for the producer, this then is a contract, say 5 years' time, with all the renewal I'm on recovery I'm going to be doing in my plantations, with this whole situation of renewing the plants and the question of the rust. So these long-term contracts, I think this could be difficult. I know it can't be with all producers, but couldn't we begin with some producers if they have the capacity to comply with this? I know there's been a lot of distortions here, but could the producer that really can achieve this, couldn't they form their chain in this way to try and rise up and increase and improve and comply with the objectives when we're considering a world that's going to be consuming over 2 million bags of coffee? Is there a way of doing this? Could it be done? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so the question for those who weren't on the headsets is one of, can the coffee industry move towards a system of long-term fixed price contracts that would take a degree of uncertainty away from the producer side of the equation? I think the answer is yes on a small scale. We do that with some. I'd say more broadly speaking, you have a lot of participants in the market who, coffee is an annual crop. One of the things that the sea provides us with the opportunity to do is take advantage of today's price tomorrow. Okay, so producers theoretically can do that. We can argue that whether access is what it should be. And when you think about the roaster side of the equation, what we hear time and time again is predictability is really necessary in their cost of goods. Back to the question of moving to a fixed price market, I mean, I'd say absolutely. It would make our life dramatically more simple. But I think that for the commodity, and as coffee differentiates, you see the more highly differentiated specialty coffees are breaking free of New York. This is happening. Let's see. What else did I miss? Did I miss something?
One of the things you asked about is around renovation, and if you had a long-term fixed contract, would you be able to incite the ability from renovation?
Yes. Okay. I mean, I think long-term investment is a tricky thing. I caught the bit about, if you have some layer of control of sort of contractual enforceability, whether it's the national coffee authorities or whomever. I think the last session was mentioning a central clearinghouse for specialty coffees. That's the key. That's the crux of the problem, is contractual enforceability. And making sure that if an investment's made, that then the coffee doesn't disappear out into one of 100 different directions. In terms of long-term investments, I guess I think the solution is much more broad. I think that the trade needs to play a role. I would argue we need to play a catalyzing role in making foundational investments. One of the things when Ben was speaking about their ability to place money, I think it's interesting thinking about what money is used for, what these loans are often used for. One of the things we've found in many countries we work is that smallholder farmers will take a large pre-harvest loan. They'll buy some fertilizer for their coffee, maybe renovate a portion of their plantation, then they'll pay school fees, they'll buy a TV, any number of things, which then don't contribute to the farm's potential profits. So this investment that we all need to make doesn't end up having the intended effect. So I guess before almost investing money, we need to, I think, lay a better foundation for people's ability to receive capital and actually allocate that correctly. We have a multi-year training program in a number of the origins we work in, which doesn't rely on just injecting money at different times of year. It's saying, how can we create the preconditions for success and growth of these farm businesses? Because every smallholder producer is essentially a micro business, a micro enterprise. So that's not a very satisfactory answer to your question, I know, but that is what it is.
Gracias, Cory.
Thank you, Cory.
No, es muy satisfactorio.
No, it's satisfactory. Thank you, but
nos va llevando también por el camino, ¿verdad? Y son
certainly we are trying to move ahead, and
cada quien tiene una forma distinta de pensar y manejar el negocio.
I think we need to know how we're going to handle the business. So how we motivate all of this. I'd like to ask Craig whether you have some way of having the consumer support the smallholder that can't deal with all the obstacles and the red tape and the paperwork, etc., in gaining finance.
Thanks for the question. I was thinking earlier on when one of the panelists was talking about pre-competitive platforms and what we see. First, I'll go back to an earlier question, and then I'll answer your current question because it's much more colorful. The current question, but one that you asked earlier, there are models to help that work directly with smallholders. Models that are out there that provide donor support, financial intermediation through local banks to, or microfinance provide a guarantee for loans straight to smallholder farmers in certain supply chains and in certain countries. So those are areas where you have the blended finance. You have donor guarantee capital supporting, commercial market capital kind of thing. So those are direct. I think when you look at each risk individually, to have and someone came up with this idea at a conference we had, the kitchen sink financing facility. It's like, each risk, the risk of acquiring mechanization is and the capital that's needed for that is different than working capital, for your inputs. That it's longer term, and so you need asset class lending and financing, to smallholders that represent the risk that's there, because they are using the money to pay school fees and this type of thing. So you need to link it a bit more to that. So those are just a couple of models that are being talked about, that one have been developed. I'm a bit more cynical about the second one. But to answer your question, are the things that consumers can do. Yes, there are these pre-competitive platforms we see in other sectors. And in fact, I'll give you an example of one that we're working on now that's in the cotton sector. And it's basically where cotton producers reach a certain sustainability elements, right, in their production. Then they receive. It's not that they receive the contract to sell. They also receive the finance. They receive basically concessional financing. So if they're stamped certified, they'll be purchased by Levi's and the other garment producers. But then they also get cheaper financing provided by the IFC, and that exists, called Better Than Cotton Initiative. And what we're working on together with a large U.S. foundation, ISF, is how do we take that successful model of alignment of the market, consumers' interest in having sustainable cotton in this instance, coffee, or whatever it is, align that consumer demand. But you can go out there and have all kinds of demand for sustainable products, but if they don't exist, if nobody's financing them, they're not going to exist. So you have to align the capital markets as well, and you might have to do that in a concessional sense, or in the initial circumstance. And so what we're looking at, and that's been successful at what's called tier 1 suppliers in cotton. So it's for Levi's, and they've been able to source. What we want to do is take that smaller and smaller down, all the way down to the smallholder suppliers. And you get when you reach a stamp holder, if you're a cooperative or that represents the smallholders, that when you get your cotton stamp, then you're going to get a concessional financing. You're going to get cheaper financing. And that's a way of the blended capital structure we're talking about. And there's no reason in coffee, I have to admit, my personal experience of coffee is a bit less than some of these other sectors. My colleagues have more of that experience. But I don't see any reason why that couldn't be something here as well. And maybe you could. That's how I can see the consumer part. So like a stamp of... And if we don't do that, I mean, I hearken back to what's happening in the orange juice market. If coffee doesn't, if it doesn't start having those kind of solutions, you run the risk of the orange juice, frozen orange juice market. So anyway.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Craig.
Thank you, Craig. I'm going to turn to Mauricio Ribeiro now to ask you to share your experience as a successful business. How, with Cochupe, with this producers' cooperative, how do you get them to comply with the terms of the contract? That's, of course, extremely important, given the quantity, the numbers that you represent in Cochupe. I think you are actually the largest in Brazil, or could we actually say you're the largest in the world? How do you police all these producers? Because I imagine there's a bit of everything, the good ones, the bad ones, the regular ones. How do you oversee that? And I think that would be very helpful for us if we had an idea of how you work. I think we heard mention of human nature already. Because really, before you get onto the cooperative or the business, it's a human being you're talking about, good or bad. Of course, it's difficult to assess that. In financial terms, what works, I believe, is if you know what the counterpart is, the bank, where the money is, knows the cooperative then has to know the farmer. There's a great conflict of interest because the farmer is the prime client and producer and head of the cooperative. Now we have to go to both the credit and the legal area, and we have to have very clear rules and regulations to ensure that there's no leakage from one to the other, because if you're head of the cooperative, then you have to be that at the assembly. And if you're talking about a loan, then you go to the credit department, because otherwise, if you can't comply, then you go to the legal affairs section. If the roles are clearly defined and regulated, then we will manage to ensure the contracts work properly. We have contracts for input supplies, and we have contracts for machinery and equipment. For inputs, that works over the crop year. For financial contracts, we have 3-year contracts for the producer. Of course, there is a deadline. 10 to 20% of the next crop can come from his store. You have, therefore, to know the producer, and you have to manage the risk on the basis of clear rules. If I could give you an example, over the last year, 1.3 million bags of fertilizers were handled for coffee. We had 1.3 million of inputs for coffee, and the contracts expired on the 12th. We received 98%, in fact, of what was owed. So I expect we'll be at 99.5% by the end of the year. That's an excellent performance, because we have rules. Each producer has the rule. They have the terms of the loan spelt out.
Mauricio, muy interesante.
Thank you, Mauricio. That was very interesting. If I could turn to Benjamin for root capital with your system. I think you said that there has to be a reserve when it comes to foreign capital. If you're talking about producer finance, if coffee is quoted in dollars in international trades, if that's in dollars, where do you see the risk of devaluations in those countries? When they deliver the coffee, it has to be in the same currency in which it was awarded.
Where do you see the risks of
the local currency?
The currency.
So the risk, on the local currency, the risk is on both. It's on the capital that we put into the market. It's less, honestly, in this situation, there's less risk on the. Historically, over the last few years, the U.S. dollar has been so strong relative to many other currencies, there hasn't been a lot of upside risk. It's all been mostly downside risk. And so the majority of the money we've put in dollars, and we've been doing this the last few years, we did it in Colombian pesos, in Ghanaian cedi, and some cocoa deals, in Ugandan shillings. We put the money in U.S. dollars. They needed to convert it to local currency, and then the producers used it to buy inputs, to renovate crops, to purchase equipment. Some of it was for pre-harvest capital. When they got the money back from the sale of goods, it was lower than the money we put into the country, even when they paid us back. Now, obviously, if the market goes in the other direction, there is risk on the upside, but currently, as it is today, it's all been on the downside. The way we have mitigated that is we have taken a mixture of public dollars from the Swedish development agency, SIDA, who put it into a currency reserve, with impact investing dollars from Impact Assets, an impact investing fund of funds based out of San Francisco. They put in matching capital. We take all the deals that when we make a deal in Colombian pesos, we tag it to this currency reserve. The reserve takes all of the losses, they absorb all of the losses, and they help make root capital whole. They would take all of the upside in theory, if there was an upside, and then the development agency would take the upside, they would plow it back into the fund to continue to grow the reserve, where the impact investing fund would actually then take the coupon or the earnings and distribute it out to the investors. So we've done that thus far. We've built the reserve. It's about $1 million. And honestly, we've kind of blown through it over the last few years because of U.S. currency devaluation. Because of local market currency devaluations. But we believe it is some level of a model that Craig is talking about around creative ways to use public and private dollars to write down a lot of this risk and share it more broadly.
Gracias. Mauricio, nos vamos a saltar el orden como veníamos.
Well, Mauricio, we don't have to go in order. I think Mauricio was asking for the floor. Yeah, just a brief comment. If coffee has liquidity in dollars, and it's good on the New York market, on the other hand, we have a lot of liquidity in international currencies, the real to dollar or some other currency. But what we can't do, let's take the small producer, for them to take the coffee risk and the risk of the currency. But a producers' organization or a cooperative can take the risk. And that's the key point. Even in Brazil, there are many institutions that try to take the dollar risk and bring the dollars for the producer. The producer can't bear that risk. They already have the risk with the coffee production, the climate risks. That's enough for the farmer. So there are these two risks of the coffee in dollars and the currency. So that's for the organization. I think that is our example that we would like to pass on for a solution. Thank you.
Gracias, gracias Mauricio.
Thank you.
Bueno, yo tengo otra cuestión, otra pregunta para.
I have another question for Corey.
Corey, si ustedes han hecho este tipo de contratos a largo plazo.
If you have these kind of long-term contracts with some coffee producers, Corey,
como intermediación un banco.
You use as an intermediary a bank, and they cover the bill. They take it first, and then they pay the producer after.
I think that's the root capital model. Exactly. So the financing, Root Capital's financing, and we've sort of taken, I think actually with Root Capital, conveniently, sorry, let me speak in the mic. So the tripartite financing agreements are quite common for us, and that Root Capital will lend money to a cooperative or a private business that's an aggregator of coffees. And then there's a loan. We're basically almost part of the loan agreement. There's a repayment structure where we make payment directly to Root Capital, and then Root Capital, assuming loans are paid off, etc., pay the remaining balance back to the producer. What we've also done, or what we've tried to layer on, is price risk management to this model as well, where a condition of financing or receiving the tranches of capital is that producers will hedge on our book as they're buying. So as they buy, depending on the country, 120,000 kilos of cherry, or if they're buying wet parch or dry parch, the equivalent of an exportable lot of green coffee, we will allow them to price fix on our book, sometimes even without contracts in place, assuming that there is a long-term relationship and that it goes through this tripartite repayment structure that sort of allows for a bit of enforceability on the contracts, in the sense that if the producers were to default, or the exporter was to default, or the cooperative to default, they might not get financing next year. So we feel a little bit more comfortable about the risk to our futures book.
No, it's okay.
Gracias, Corey, bastante clara tu
Thank you,
respuesta.
Corey. That was a clear answer.
Bueno, este foro es un ensayo de lo que se puede hacer, y tenemos que ver.
This is really a first effort, this forum.
Visión a largo plazo,
We need
¿verdad?
the long-term view in dealing with coffee. We need the long-term view, and we have to cover the economic and the social dimension as well as the political side. So what do we need? We need co-responsibility, both on the part of the grower, the producer, and industry, or at the end of the chain, the consumer. And I would conclude that it's a bit like riding a bicycle, really. You have to keep pedaling. That's coffee, because if you don't, you're going to fall off. So I think that would be my conclusion. And can I thank you all very much for your patience. So thank you all. Thank you to all the panelists.
Bueno, muchas gracias a nuestros panelistas, muchas gracias a